Standards Learning and Accountability Committee. Just a personal note, Jackie Lynn, who typically chairs this committee, is a principal, elementary school principal in Darlington, and it's an important day today with state testing, and she is there making sure everything runs as it should. So, and that's what a good principal would do. So, with that, our committee, Ginger Cato, Chris Hanley, and Tony Vincent, we have a quorum, and we'd like to welcome those who are in attendance. Are there any visitors? No visitors? Okay. Is there any objection to approving the minutes as presented? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. And Barbara, maybe I should wait because I'm one committee member short. So to approve that, she's in the restroom.
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just take a pause.
I think you do have a visitor.
Oh, Kathy, how are you? You're fun to follow on Facebook with all your travels. She is. I'm going to get you an orange sweatshirt, though. Well, good. So, with that, we'll back up. Is there any objection to approving the minutes as presented? Hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Is there any objection to approving the agenda as presented? Hearing none, the agenda is approved by unanimous consent. And so I don't think we have anyone for public comment today. And so I want to recognize at this time, and we have no items for approval. There are no items for approval, but we do have a very important, lively topic for information on the school report card overview and process, and I'd like to recognize Dr. Van Holden and Dr. Era Roberts to present this information to us. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mathis. Dr. Roberts and I are very excited to be with you today to talk about all the exciting work happening here at the agency to bring a productive school report card to the public in fall of 2026. By productive, I mean a report card that delivers accurate data, that delivers it in a timely manner, and can be used for school improvement processes, which is the purpose of our accountability system. I've got Dr. Roberts here with me today. She's one of our agency's newest hires. She's our accountability program manager. She came on board with us in February, and she's going to be talking a little bit about the work that she's done since she's been here. Prior to that, she was the director of accountability assessment and professional development in the school district of Newberry County. So has a background in this work similar to me as the chief research officer here at the agency. But prior to this, I was the director of planning and accountability in one of our local school districts as well. So following the release of the 2025 school report cards, we initiated a process for reviewing exactly what transpired with the 2025 report cards, as well as how we were going to improve the delivery. We had the school report card release on November 3rd at Annie Burnside Elementary, and on November 3rd, we came back to the agency and we began work on how we were going to improve things for 2026. And what we identified as one of our first next steps was to create a cross-functional team here at the agency, because one thing you might not know from the outside is that the school report card is actually a team effort here at the agency. Nearly every office is involved in the data that goes into it, or the analysis, or the coding, or even the communication of it. And we really needed to bring together that external team and the internal team to work on that process if we were going to deliver it. We also designed a mission for that process for this accountability report card team, which is to make sure that we have a process here that defines excellence, measures what matters, and provides our families, our educators, and our policymakers with actionable, easy to understand information that we can use to drive improvements for our students. We identified 3 goals that carry through this process. 1, accountability. We need to be defining what excellence looks like and how we're going to measure that. 2, how do we report the data and what are the analytics associated with it? Again, that's the part that goes into making sure it's useful to folks in the field, both to folks here at the agency, but also district school leaders, also to parents and teachers. And the 3rd goal is data collection and quality. How do we strengthen the processes and systems that we have in place there to ensure that all the data is flowing in and reaching the agency in a timely manner, and all the coding on it is working as well. We identified 3 groups to lead some of this work. We have a governance layer, we have a core team, and we have pods, okay? And the governance layer is the group that sets our vision and priorities. They align the resources and assist with leading out what our work is going to be there in the post-cycle. They meet once a month. We just had our governance layer meeting yesterday. The core team is a group that's internal here at the agency, primarily, although we do have one partner from the Education Oversight Committee who's part of our core team as well. But that's where we start to manage the vision, all right, that comes from the governance layer, laying out exactly what we're going to be doing going forward to execute that vision. Where the core team is the group that leads the regular, ongoing work that is going to produce that report card for us this fall and communicates across teams. And then we have pods of work. That's where we get even more granular, right? And we start to get into actual technical tasks that are being accomplished on a daily basis. Sometimes those groups are meeting more than once a week. Sometimes they're meeting every other week. It really depends on the nature of their work and what they're trying to accomplish. We have 3 broad groups there. Again, a governance layer, which is establishing the vision and the priorities. The core team, which is then organizing that work and leading the delivery of that work. And then pods of work, which are then getting into very granular details. And we do have folks who serve as often on, in this case, we have folks who are on the core team and then serve as pod leaders for the work that's occurring there, or pod members and providing a role there. Dr. Roberts is going to talk to us a little bit about who's on each of these layers.
All right. Well, thank y'all all for welcoming us today and receiving this information. So this piece is just giving you a little bit of a flyover of that structure. Of course, Dr. Holden is our initiative lead, and he's really coordinating and prioritizing the work that's going on in the teams. And then you can see those key stakeholders that are in our governance layer. And you can see that's a representation of folks from our EOC and from SCDE providing governance, that resource alignment, the direction. Again, that is happening each month and really informing the work that's happening in the pods. But we also have advisory contributors that are looped in when appropriate, bringing in their expertise, review, and joining into that governance layer. So as you can see, there's several different representations there from, of course, Ellen Weaver, our state superintendent, to the governor's office, particular folks here from SCDE, and additional above and beyond, wherever we need that expertise, whether it's data governance or specific pieces from the report card, whatever piece is needed, looping them into that governance layer so we can make sure we're getting the information that we need to then inform the core team and the pod work that happens from there. Going into that core team, and there's actually 2 slides of the core team to give you that representation of. This first slide is going in more to that EOC layer, communications, assessment, the leadership piece. The next one I'm going to show you is a little bit more of an IT focus, but this team is meeting every single week. Every week, they are coming together, bringing in the leadership, where are we going, what's happening on the teams, keeping the updates from the pods, knowing what's next and what's happening in policy, forming information about communications, and where we are in our assessment work. So that's one layer of it. But there's another layer also coming to that team each week from the IT side. What's happening with our data storage? How's our data management happening? How's that landing in our website? Our data validation, how we're checking it, what's coming in, how's it looking? Is it following our rules that we know that are in place? And then our data collection lead, we're making sure that data's getting there, that the data that's coming in, that it's being collected, and it's landing the way that we need it to land. So it's not just, okay, here's policy and now make a report card. It's checking in on all the pieces that come in and bringing this team together every week to know progress, next steps, and then aligning those pieces back to policy. So we're going to jump in a little bit to the pod work here, and there's plenty of details that we could go in with every pod, but I just wanted to kind of give you an idea of the mission of each pod and why it's there. And you can see, of course, who's leading it and what their timeline work is. But of course, the policy pod is an essential piece to kick off with, because that's what informs our state and federal policies around accountability and constraints, and making sure that what we're planning for is meeting the needs of the state and is aligning for policy, and that we're implementing it in our context here in our state. So the Education Oversight Committee is connected in with our work in pretty much every layer. You saw them in governance, you see them in core team, and we also have a pod that meets and that we join with there. In short-term visualization, I'm a part of that pod, and that's where we're looking at specific changes. We know that there was a cyclical review of the school report card, and there were some informed pieces of things that we know that our communities and our stakeholders want to see in our school report card. Not all of those things can just happen this year. Of course, that's a big shift, but there are some small short-term things, just some pieces that can provide clarity, improve understanding. Maybe it's a wording change, maybe it's a small shift of a piece of data, including another little element that we wanted to see there. Those pieces we can do pretty quickly, and so those are our short-term changes, and that work is happening and ongoing. But we also have a long-term visualization pod that's looking at what's the bigger vision. Where do we want to get this to, taking that information from the cyclical review team and thinking from our stakeholders, what do we really want to see, and making a plan to make that happen earlier, as really thinking about it in the future. Not something that we might can see on this year's report card, but something that we're planning for future long-term changes to bring those bigger goals to life. In our reporting alignment pod, this is where we have to check that code, right, and make sure that the things that we're loading into our report card follow the rules of the manual, and that the code that SCD has and the code that our GPS or our analytics system has are following the rules, and that we're consistent and that we're checking, we're validating those rules. And then as the data comes in, there's a data flow monitoring pod, and these teams are checking in on their work, whatever their mission, whatever their scope is, they're checking in on those pieces and bringing those updates back to our team. So you can see in this one, they're taking in the data from PowerSchool, they're taking the data from assessments, they're checking to see that data is landing, and it's not just a check at the end, but an ongoing check as pieces are coming in and seeing that it's staying there. And the wrap up here in goal 3 from me, and then Dr. Holden will give you a few more, because as you saw, we have quite a few pods that are working here. There's a lot that goes into the report card, but we've also provided professional development to our district. So district leaders have had access to professional development that we've done at least a couple different sessions each month live for them, but we've also stored that as videos and made those available to them. We provided the slides and even landed it into a website that they can get access to moving forward, sending out those updates, and it's continuing, and it's all based on the feedback we received on what they needed to make those improvements, so that they know, what does the policy say, where does the data need to be coded, and how can you check to make sure that it really got there. So those are some pieces that we're bringing to them, and then trying to store that in a way that they can continue to get access to.
Thanks, Sarah. And with the PD pod, we really focused that on what were the critical issues from the 2025 report card. We identified several places where if we could improve data coding and data quality, we could deliver the report cards in a better manner for 2026. And so we've worked to build that out with different members of our team here and what that looks like. And we've been delivering that since January. And we've had more than 200 district leaders engaged in every session except for one, which was still in the hundreds, just didn't quite break the 200 threshold that we've had for the other ones. We'll be continuing that this month and in June as well. One of the other pieces we've done is to improve transparency around the data. We're trying to make sure folks know, here's what you code in PowerSchool, or here's the data that you submit to SCDE, and here's how that relates to your report card rating. So helping district leaders see exactly how that data flows through and lands here at SCDE, so they know exactly how the rating is being calculated, which can improve data accuracy on their end. Another piece that's underway that's less exciting but is absolutely critical is we actually have to develop accountability-related data sets. So at the end of the school year, we take all the data that districts have submitted to us, and we create data sets that are used for accountability purposes, that are static data sets that we can then use to say, all right, here's the students who were included for continuous enrollment. Here are the students who have assessments more than 1 year in a row and could be used for student progress and were continuously enrolled. Here's the students who are in the graduation cohorts. All that data has to be developed into a data set that can be used by the folks who work on the technical side to produce the report cards. And so that's work that we're engaging in. One other piece that we've done here is try to standardize our timeline for the report card, looking at every single piece, like those accountability data sets. When can they be produced? When have they been produced in the past? When should they be produced for this year? Are there things that we can move up in the timeline in order to prevent a backlog of work? And what does that look like? Who's responsible for the different pieces, right? Which office, which personnel, and how do we make sure we've got standardized check-ins throughout the way, throughout the process, so we can ensure we're on time for that. Developing a technical team then looks at each of the pieces of the code and determines what changes we can make for this year, which are the low-lift changes, which are the things that are going to require more work and more effort. We've got a team currently working on that without a lead, but we've got a group of people that meet weekly to look at the technical aspects of this. And then we've got a communications team. That's our most recent addition. One thing we found is that we're doing a lot of work, and we have to be able to narrate that to schools and districts to say, this is everything that SCD has put together for this year. Here's what we need from districts. Here's what we've accomplished. Here's what we need from schools. Here's what you can expect from SCD throughout this process. So that group was more recently formed, and it'll continue to work throughout the delivery of the 2026 report cards. So what have we accomplished specifically? So the first thing, backing up here, is we engaged in kind of a deep dive into the process from 2025. We engaged, of course, the governance layer. We engaged testing and accountability leaders throughout the state. We engaged folks internally and did kind of a deep dive to identify what were the needed improvements. We've then gone through, if you look at like the timeline, we identified all the data elements that are required. What are the dependencies? Who's responsible? And charting that process out so we know exactly who's doing what and why. And then we developed that piece a little further and took that into the timeline. Say, here's exactly what has to be produced and when it has to be produced. Here's the calculation that goes into that. Here's the visualization and who is responsible for each step. Part of our project management piece for this to ensure it gets delivered. And then we utilized all that feedback to really shape improvements to the report cards that we anticipate for 2026, as well as policy proposals for 2027. Dr. Roberts mentioned a few of those pieces that are coming together already.
And I spoke to you a little bit about the professional development that we've provided. And so just, again, that's been in action. We've made those things happen, sharing with them key metrics, coding requirements, data reviews, with that policy, with the screenshots, how to check in validation screens to see that their data landed. That's happened monthly, and we've gone over many different inputs to the report card, including cohorts, which inform those things like graduation rate and high school student success, or that on-track status, fifth-year success, and academic achievement. So just pulling in several different elements, the pieces that inform the report card, and sharing with our district leaders how that policy informs practice and how practice informs outcomes. We've also improved the transparency piece, creating that documentation around data sourcing. What are the lines? Where does it pull from? We even created a mapping document that they can pull code to even just load straight in like a copy paste. So if you're not a coder, you can use this copy paste model and kind of get those pieces back out to know a little bit more about how that data would land for you, and loaded all that into a website to make it accessible to our district leaders. So really working to improve clarity and transparency and access to all of our districts in the state for the report card coming up here in 2026.
And both of these pieces were ones that we identified as critical needs and comes from kind of our background and what we've done for local districts, but also what we've seen throughout the process. And speaking one more thing to professional development, our last one we did, like we engaged, there were folks from the Office of Career Readiness who were part of that professional development here at the agency, multiple folks from the Office of Information Technology, and our folks from the Office of Accountability and Research, which again I think speaks to engaging as many different folks who are active in this process to ensure we're delivering appropriate communications and support to school districts throughout this process. The part we're in now as well is we're currently monitoring the data and ensuring how it's landing here at SCDE. We're testing that data, making sure that it's looking like it's supposed to look, that we don't have data that's not coming and being transmitted through different systems or not being published by a school district. We're also going through processes and tests to ensure that we can reproduce the 2025 report card, but then take that same data, same rules, and apply that to 2026. So even though we don't have all the data in yet, we're already conducting testing to verify that 2026 data can be produced through the appropriate policies and procedures here. And then we're also looking at what a procedure will look like for a proactive data correction window for the summer of 2026. So those are the kind of the steps that we've taken here, right? That's what we've been working on the last few months, since really November of 2025, sometimes on a monthly basis, sometimes on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis. But what I can tell you is it's been a team effort here at the agency. Office of Implementation and Supports has been involved. Various divisions here within the agency, various offices within CCMR as well as IT, and communications, all engaged, all contributing to the work, trying to create a system here that's really going to ensure that we're measuring what matters, that we're producing a report card that is accurate and that is helpful and ultimately is going to be used to drive improvement for all the stakeholders who are engaging in that process, whether you're a teacher or an administrator or a policymaker, right? We want to engage all those folks throughout this process. So we'll stand for any questions you might have.
Well, Dr. Holden and Dr. Roberts, thank you very much. I think what's eye-opening here is the amount of data that it is involved in making creating the report card. Sometimes we just think it's test scores, but it's much, much more than that. And for you to be able to produce that report card, when is the deadline when's the date for the report card to be released?
By proviso, it's October 15th.
October 15th. Between now and then, it's a monumental amount of work that you've got to do, and I applaud you for working with districts, because what we forget is there is so much data that they send in an error on their end could really affect the report card. So thank you for working with them to make sure that process is seamless. So,
Absolutely.
Sure.
Dr. Holden, Dr. Roberts, in the collection of all of this for the report card, is there a mechanism that we have in place now to share information with, like higher education, workforce development, those kinds of things? Is that still in place?
Yes. So we have a variety of partnerships there that exist, especially with the department, DEW, with EOC, with CCWD. We're working to share information with each other to better study what are the trends in the K-12 inputs, right? And what's happening then when the students leave us. We've got some projects that we've already engaged with USC, with their Alamo School of Business, trying to track specific K-12 inputs or pre-K through 12 inputs, and what changes does that lead for students once they leave our schools. Maybe that's going into a career, maybe that's going into college, but not just tracking that job placement, but what are the other health outcomes that we see, and really doing some analysis, pulling different data sets that exist at like revenue and fiscal affairs, for example. But we're really leveraging those types of partnerships to do some analysis, and also building our research team here at the agency as well. But we've got a variety of projects kind of in the queue and partnerships we've established over the last few years here, and continuing to build those out. But great question, yeah.
I have a question, if I may. Could you tell me what you consider the three most important pieces of data coming from the school districts in their school report card?
Yeah, the three most critical elements at this point, right, that we've been really focused on. The first thing, and this is based off of what we saw from 2025, is the 9GR cohort. The 9GR cohort is which group you're assigned to during high school, right, that says this is what your 4-year on track to graduate or 4-year graduation period would be. So we need to make sure students are accurately assigned to a cohort, okay, because that's going to matter for graduation. It matters for college and career readiness, which is another metric for the report card. And it matters for, are you on track to graduate? It matters for 5th-year student success. So that one piece of data, right, ends up touching so many other pieces of the accountability data. It also plays a role in academic achievement. When we have a student who's, for whatever reason, missing a test score by their 4th year of high school, the 9GR cohort plays a role. So that's the first thing. The next piece we look at then is, are you included in the cohort, right? And these are things before we even get to, did a student graduate or is the student on track? What's their 9GR? What's their 9th grade code, right? What year do they begin high school? And then should they be included or not included? Because we have students who come and go all the time, right? And some students may leave a cohort for a valid reason. Maybe they've transferred to another public school in South Carolina. Maybe they've transferred to another diploma-granting institution in a different state. Well, then they get removed from that sending school's cohort. But there's other reasons a student might not get removed from that cohort. And we need to be addressing those reasons. Maybe they've just dropped out. Well, we should be re-engaging those students. But having accurate data on whether or not they should be included in the cohort is the next part. And then the other part that we're looking at and working with districts on to support them in is that transfer of test scores to SCDE, to make sure that when we receive a test score, whether it's SAT, ACT, AP, all those scores are then arriving at SCDE, and because those all play a role in college and career readiness, right? With that, you've got data that has to be coded in PowerSchool as well, things that go into a student's career and technical education completer, work-based learning, different pieces. So we've really tried to make sure that throughout the winter and spring here, we've been communicating exactly what those requirements are to our district leaders, so they know this is what's required. These were the critical errors we saw from a coding standpoint at the district level, or from a data transfer standpoint. These are the critical errors we saw, so we can make sure all district leaders are aware of what those needs are. Like Dr. Roberts mentioned there, we've tried to lay out for them This is what the accountability requirement is. Here's what the coding requirement to fulfill that is. We've also built out systems by which they can check their data. So they can see this is what SCDE has in real time for a student. Is this student in our cohort? Is this student out of our cohort? What is the student's current college and career readiness status? All that data is available in real time to districts, so we've tried to equip them with that. So I would say, to answer your question more directly, what's their 9GR, what's that 9th grade code? Are they included in the cohort? And what data have we received on those students? Those have been the three most critical. But of course, that's really high school, right? For our elementary and middle schools, right? The focus is on that continuous enrollment piece and making sure we're defining that correctly. And then we'll receive those test scores here in the next few months, and that'll populate a lot of their academic achievement and student progress data.
What is it about the way we're doing that would have a school district report graduation rates increasing, and yet the percentage of graduates that can't read at 6th grade level in that class are increasing also?
Yeah, we've identified a number of things there to work with districts to improve the outcomes of students, right? And that probably goes beyond, and Dr. Duggins may have some things, and so Ms. Tolman-Sanger may as well. But one of the things we've noted as a state, right, is that over the last 6 to 7 years, the gap between our graduation rate and our percentage of students who are college and career ready has shrunk. I don't have those exact stats in front of me, but we've really, over the last, and this goes back to pre-COVID to now, we're seeing less and less of a gap between our students who are graduates and college and career ready. And what our vision here is that, of course, all students are going to be, or 75% of our students are going to be on grade level in math and ELA, but we're also working to ensure that all of our graduates are going to be college and career ready to enter whatever part of the workforce is. So I don't know if Dr. Duggins wants to speak to any other interventions that we're trying to ensure that all of our graduates are ready for careers. Sorry. That may go beyond the scope of what I was ready for.
No, this is great. I always like the opportunity to talk about what we're doing in CCMR. And Mr. Harrington, you've heard me talk even earlier today about the foundational literacy training that we've provided. We also have had that sustained focus on mathematics, so that CRA model, so ensuring that all students have that really strong foundation. But I would say one of our most effective strategies that we've just deployed in the last year has been the work we've done around HQIM, that high-quality instructional material. And you've heard me say it before, but for a long time, we sent out the textbooks and kind of wiped our hands, and with a hope and a prayer, textbooks got into the hands of students and teachers, and the students learned. But now we've been very intentional about supporting our school and district leaders, supporting our teachers in how to really understand those materials and deploy those materials. And so our strategy has been, if you implement the high-quality instructional materials with fidelity, if you participate in our high-quality professional learning in math and literacy, we will start creating those conditions so students can learn, and we will see that gap close.
So early years are probably most important where you do your assessments. And so you have a baseline for that group or class to know whether they're learning better than previously or not.
Yes.
I see.
And you'll remember in the literacy data that we've seen this year, we saw the most significant growth in that 3rd grade cohort. And we know that we have, especially in literacy, focused our professional learning in building capacity in those teachers in the 4K through 3rd grade space. And so our prediction is that as those students come up through the 3rd grade, where our state summative testing begins, they will continue to increase in their readiness.
And you're also able to identify those that need help at that point.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
I think Ms. Quimminger had a question or comment.
We had some glitches last year with this report card that caused a little delay. I'm assuming you've kind of learned from that to help make sure that's not the case.
Yeah, learning a good
hopefully.
deal. Learning never ends. So what we've seen is there were 3 primary areas, right? And I've talked to superintendents about this. We've talked to accountability leaders about this. It's not a blame game situation, but we had 3 primary areas. One, we had coding issues at the district and school level. right? And to explain some of that too, we've got folks who retire and change positions throughout the summer. Last year, we had folks who would retire on July 1st, and we had to work on transition plans with those districts to ensure the one person in their district responsible for this data, who's now gone, has been doing it 20 years, there's somebody else now who can carry that load. But we did have some errors there at the school and district level for what data was transmitted. We had a vendor error where data wasn't being transmitted, so a district may have coded their stuff correctly, but the data did not make it to SCDE. So when we talk about that data flow monitoring group, that's what they're monitoring right now, to make sure all the data is making it to SCDE and we aren't seeing district data getting dropped along the way. Our PD efforts are largely to address what we're seeing, what we saw last year from the district coding side. So we've got the PD to address that part. We're also monitoring whether or not folks are engaging with the data validation tools that we've created, and we've seen an increase in users and increase in visits on that part. The other part that we saw was different coding issues on the SCDE side, right? So we had district and school coding issues, we had data transmission issues, and we had SCDE coding issues. And a lot of the pod work that you saw that we just listed, accountability data set verification, reporting and alignment pod, they're engaging in ongoing work to ensure that the coding here at SCDE matches what's in policy, and then ensuring that it's going to end up being delivered in terms of what's on the report card. So,
And of course, we're glad you did all of that so that we had correct data for those schools.
yeah.
Dr. Hanley, I think you have a question.
I do. So I hear an awful lot of talk about college and career ready, and that's awesome. That's great. But one of the other things that we've talked about is military ready as well. And so I hear an awful lot of data about college and career ready. But I mean, this is my 4th year on the board. I have not yet heard anyone talk about our graduating students and how they perform. Do we have any data on how they perform on the ASVAB?
Yeah, so we do. The ASVAB is one of our measures of college and career readiness. We actually, at our governance layer yesterday, had a long discussion about the ASVAB in particular and its implementation. I believe that we've got the military representatives coming to speak at one of the upcoming Education Oversight Committee subcommittee meetings to talk about some things they're seeing in their data and working to ensure that how we represent ASVAB data or other military preparation programs in the state are represented within the accountability model. Currently it is, while it's labeled as college and career readiness, the military data is considered as part of that process, where at the agency, of course, we've got our division of college, career, and military readiness. It's just not reflected that way in the current metric naming, but that's where it falls under. We're really monitoring that piece of it. We're uncovering some different pieces about that create some challenges here in South Carolina, just based off of how that data is collected, right? How that test is administered, but also what are the military's procedures. I've learned that South Carolina is in a bit of a unique spot because a lot of our ASVAB procedures are governed by the Columbia office, right? Things through Fort Jackson. But then part of our state also falls under the Jacksonville base, and they follow the procedures which are slightly different. And so we're working to make sure we've got aligned procedures throughout the state that are going to produce accurate results for the accountability process that we can depend on and use to inform student work.
All right, thank you. So that's one piece of it.
Yeah.
Then, of course, you've probably seen the stats that, when you look at young people graduating from high school now, only about 25% of them are eligible for military service. Sometimes that's because of trouble they've gotten into with drugs or other disciplinary actions. But another big piece of that is physical fitness. When they come in at, with a BMI of 35, you're not going to get in the military unless you do a lot of work in advance. What are we doing as far as is there anything as far as physical fitness that continues on, like really encouraging folks in some nutrition training and things like that, trying to, Secretary Kennedy, I'm sure, will go on for days talking about, getting these vending machines out of schools and improving what we have in our cafeterias. But, are we looking at that end of things as well?
Beyond the fact that yesterday I did volunteer to race all of the upcoming military prospects in the 2-mile PT test as part of that, I don't have a ton of input on that part of it. I don't know if Dr. Duggins, if you want to come back and speak about it, if you have anything to add to that part either, in terms of SCD's work. Sorry.
No worries at all. We are, continuing the work that we collect FitnessGram information from our districts. We collect, districts administer things like the PACER test. We know that the physical education bill is working its way through. So it is definitely on the minds of the people, but I don't have a ton of details
Okay.
about specifically ensuring that our high school graduates are physically fit.
Yeah, they can be awesome at all of their academics, and they can be, of great character. But if they're fat and can't run, sorry, they're not getting in the military.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir.
All right, Mr. Trent?
Just real quick, just two questions. Can you guys ensure that we won't have a hurricane the week of October the 15th to delay results? You don't have to answer that one. But I've been looking at this data for a number of years, and obviously there's a lot of real estate, economic development activity that comes with this data, and a lot of people are looking at it. But we don't ever seem to have like any sort of trend analysis in the school report card. We have, typical district, state, and then how that school compares, but we're never looking at, it's all isolated in an individual year. Has there been any thought to kind of study that so people can see, okay, this is where this school's progressing, or this is where this district is progressing?
The long and short answer is yes. So as I mentioned earlier, long-term visualization pod, that from the cyclical review of the school report card that just very recently occurred, that is one of the recommendations. And we would love to see in long-term visualization when we're thinking about that vision, because we know it's not only helpful for our school people to have that at a glance, it's helpful for our community members, our legislature. I mean, it's helpful for everyone to have that at a glance. So that is absolutely in the scope of work. Not likely a short-term fix, because that, trend visualization is not just like let's just click this here. But it is certainly in the scope of work, and we're looking at how we can incorporate that in this year without breaking anything, so that we can give some of those pieces this year. So that is also in the short-term pod. But as far as really robust visualizations that give you exactly what you're asking for, that's a little bit more of a long-term piece of work. But we're even looking to see what we can get in for you this year as well.
Cool, thanks.
So if I went to our graduation rate page, right, that's the one that presents graduation rate data in a table format, which is not an ideal visualization necessarily, but it accomplishes kind of what you're talking about. And what we're looking at this year is, can we take any of these other data pieces and provide that longitudinal data in some format to give that trend analysis for folks, so they don't have to go digging through multiple years of a report card without breaking the process. We don't want to break this whole thing and then have a different issue lead to downstream effects, right? So, but long term, we're looking at how do we build those things out in a way that is more meaningful to folks. We've got what we've also discovered is we've got a lot of folks who engage with the report card who have different levels of experience with educator or education data. And so we have to kind of be mindful of all the different roles that are coming to it to look at it and figure out how do we package the data in a way that is a way that everybody can understand, everybody can access, and maybe some folks can go a little deeper on in different areas depending on their needs and roles.
Do you study, several schools, districts now have these schools of innovation in various subject area. We have a school of innovation in healthcare. We have a school of innovation in aerospace and aircraft maintenance and that sort of thing. And we're starting a school of high school, a military high school, in conjunction with cooperation with the Citadel. But it seems that, is there any way you can measure those separately to see if they're getting better results and share that in ways that influences other districts?
Yeah, so two things there. We just had the opportunity to visit one of those in Horry County in Mr. Richardson's district just a few weeks ago at AAST. So we're always looking at who are these folks or who are these schools that are producing the results that we want to see, and then how do we replicate that work, and we're studying that as well. I know the Education Oversight Committee has done some of that work as well, and we're looking at that same piece of who are the schools that are defining some of the trends or producing results that we really think indicate we should get some further study in with. And that's something our research team is looking at too. Not just to say, all right, this is what the data says on that school, but then what are the things that we're seeing within that school? What are the habits? What are the processes? What are the procedures? And how do we document those in a way that we can have a playbook of sorts for other schools and districts around the state that want to replicate that level of success? I
guess it's possible for somebody to go through a school of innovation and get a job and never do the academic work satisfactorily.
I don't know that it's they would have to, of course, accrue the credits, right, to graduate. But of course,
yeah, to graduate. But an employer probably doesn't care whether they graduate as long as they can handle that machine or run that machine or whatever.
Yeah, every employer might have their own standard for that.
Well, Dr. Holden and Dr. Roberts, thank you very much. I think you have earned the credibility to be invited back. There's so much that you have presented that I think is great, and there's more that we want to hear. So thank you very much.
Enjoyed it. Thank you for
for
the
your time. So there are no approval items before the committee, so there are no items to be placed on the consent agenda. If there's no other business, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved, Vincent.
So moved, Vincent, second. Cato, all in favor with aye? All opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.